Good evening, Galion, and welcome to Facebook Live with Mayor Tom O'Leary. It's great to be back once again the Monday night before our Tuesday council meeting to give you an update on some things that are going on in the city, and certainly probably the most informative part for both viewers and for myself is when questions come in on particular topics that are a buzz here in town. Just a quick a trio maybe of project updates and comments I'll make here at the outset. We are wrapping up the paving program for this year. Some of because they are on some very heavily traveled streets, I think many motorists are aware of the improvements on Harding Way West, South Street, Fairview, and Atwood. We're really waiting for cooperation with the weather and the timing with our contractor to finish up in Heist Park, but really believe that's going to be well on our way before, and behind us before we get much farther into July. So that's a big project. It's great to see now a restarted tradition, which is really becoming a tradition again in Galion, and that's Safety Town. Sort of co-sponsored at the schools along with our school resource officer at the Galion Police Department. But was talking today, although it's a one-week program, people who would hear about Safety Town tonight as a result of watching this could go to the school early tomorrow and register their soon-to-be kindergartner in this program, which orients young people to traffic safety, fire safety, and those sorts of things. So my wife and I managed that for about 25 years, and so it's great to see that back and up and running and in the hands of Galion Police Department. So those are two items. I think the third thing I'd want to say in terms of the outset is tomorrow night's council meeting, probably the most consequential but I think a change for the better is on the agenda tomorrow night. The most consequential thing on the agenda tomorrow night is consideration of reduction in speed limits out on 598 Portland Way North in the rapidly developing corridor out there. As we anticipate getting money to widen that section of highway, I think slowing down the traffic is both what ODOT and what local safety officials believe is really the right approach, and expect to hear from council tomorrow night that they agree with that, and it'll most likely pass tomorrow night. So those items to start with are a few things going on in the community, and at about the halfway point of the year budget-wise, we're really well into July, but at the halfway point, revenues, generally speaking, we're holding pretty solid for the city, and our financial picture is strong enough that I really can see no reason at this point that the city won't be released from fiscal emergency in the Labor Day, shall we say, August-September range, just later this year. So that will be a big achievement here at City Hall. I think its impact on community members is probably not that great, but in terms of responsibilities and managing the city, it will be back on the shoulders of local officials, and I think we're well on our way to a full financial recovery. Now what we have to do is everything that we can to provide for growth in residential properties. As I've said the last couple of times, we've had these Facebook meetings that one of the biggest challenges for the city is to begin to add some housing, and there's at least one developer in the community that's looking at adding housing, and so we'll begin to pursue that and see what the city needs to do to extend the adequate utilities to those sites. So it's probably 3, 4, or maybe 5 different things that to kick off tonight's meeting. Didn't know if there were any questions at this point.
This is actually a question left over from last time. Ashley wanted to know, will there be an Oktoberfest this year?
Well, I think the Oktoberfest as is traditionally known, is won't be conducted. There won't be here to enjoy this year. The person who ran that Oktoberfest for many years has decided that he's really wants to just let it be, if you will. And at this point, there's been no other organization or individual to step forward. I think it's the city. Really, our role in it is to make sure our city workers are there to extend the necessary utilities and be there for cleanup and any kind of crowd control or safety force uses that we need. So it's really not a city function, but it's certainly a community function. And while the Oktoberfest as a street fair in Uptown is likely not to happen this year, there is the possibility that a few other groups may organize something on a smaller scale. I think some of those organizations are trying to make a decision about if they have enough time to put together a nice event, and whether or not, if they scale back the event, it would be a disappointment to folks who think of the Oktoberfest of the last 30 or so years. So I think the answer is there'll be likely something later in the fall, but it certainly won't be on the same scale as the carnival-based street fair that we've had uptown for many years.
Okay, another leftover question from last week. Tim asked, is there anything, anything that you can tell us about a grocery store coming in?
Yeah, I think as has been discussed before, I was touching base with the owner of the shopping center. There are several, meaning at least two prospects that I know they're working with. It really is, again, it's a community issue. There's only certain things that City Hall can do, and I believe that staying in touch with the landlord and keeping them appraised of what types of incentives the city has in place that would be there for a new operator are probably the two biggest roles that we can play. And I remain pretty optimistic that a independent grocer will move in there, get a lease with the landlord, and we'll be back to business. I've noticed, and my hope is that it's a 24-hour store. I've been over the last few weeks getting back into town late after baseball games, and you certainly miss that 24-hour store and the convenience that comes with that. And actually was at a coffee one morning at about 6 o'clock, so through the drive-through I went instead of brewing it at home. So I'm like everyone else. The getting a grocery store back in town is something that we're all looking forward toward, and working in a small way at City Hall to support the full-time efforts that Perrin Management's been putting into getting a new tenant. Yeah, the other thing that we had, and I'm not sure, I think we attempted to send some pictures of some playground equipment. The freeze funds now in their fourth or fifth year of being in the city's hands to come up with projects to divide up the proceeds of that major estate. And so as we continue to work on bathroom projects for this year in a couple different locations, and we're finishing up the tennis courts, it's really a project that here at City Hall is a leftover project from 2017, but as we wrap those projects up, we've been working on some new playground equipment, and the theme of this playground equipment really is based on trying to capture some of the heritage of Galion's industrial past, and have some customized type playground equipment that makes coming to Heist Park, at least initially, and then to other parks in the community, something that people think about as a reason to come to Galion. Also something that when folks are here visiting and involved in other activities, that having really an outstanding set up playground equipment in at least one park is something that's kind of next on the agenda here for freeze funds. If you can think of a sort of playground equipment which has been customized and has the kind of fun and play factor that the splash park has, it's that kind of effort that we're interested in trying to make happen. So not sure if some of the initial graphic designs of a mocked up road grader, and then kind of my favorite is the roller, which would allow kids to play and crawl through a roller, and also imagine being in charge of or operating playground equipment. So we're really looking initially at those two pieces of equipment, but I think our plan for next year, meaning 2019, and then going forward each year, is to add a little bit more equipment. Some of it themed as perhaps a snow plow or a dump body from yesteryear of Galion industry, but really something that's more than people would expect, and something that people, when they come to Galion, that would be a memory that would stick in their mind. So again, that's using the annual freeze funds. It's not taking taxpayer money and putting it into fancy playground equipment, but it's having fancy playground equipment because we have the benefit of such a generous foundation dedicated to parks and recreation here in Galion. So. I think it's no. The short answer is there's nothing. We're still hoping to be in the running for a project that the city had put together an incentive package, and I think the owner of the property a real nice renovation package to suit their expansion needs. What I hope happens is that if that project does not land, so to speak, then that we'll really be in a position to move ahead with the overall strategy, which is to demolish the old buildings and then construct new buildings going forward. So, to Dawn's question, no, there's nothing. We've heard nothing on the projects that we can't do is become totally dependent on receiving certain state funds. So, tear down. I really think that kind of activity uptown is positive, and I'm not sure during the time of day. We probably have a good debate about this, so if she's got a follow-up question, we should probably get it back and forth. But on Friday and Saturday night, my experience has been, prior to those vehicles up there, that you could shoot the proverbial water cannon off uptown and no one would get wet. There just was very little going on. And so what I'm seeing now is there is some activity down in the next block. It's great that the bistro's open in the evening. I think the business on the corner, the Planet 14, while it's not for somebody my age, from what I understand, it's a great place for younger people and younger families to go. So I really don't, I see those food trucks as perhaps the beginning of more activity uptown, and gee, what would be wrong with that?
Okay, next question comes from Dawn. She asks, will the water slide at the highest pool get updated? It's hard on backs.
Is it? I'm too, I don't mean, I'll check into that. I would say that making sure that the Heist Park pool has top quality. We're not going to compete with Zambezi Bay. I was listening to some college kids talking about having gone down to the water park near the zoo, and it was, how much fun they had. But I tell you, for a small town, that's a pretty nice slide we have. You'd hate to get it to a point where it became in disrepair or needed updated. So I think I'll take that as a suggestion. I don't think I'll test it out, but I'll have somebody in my office go down that, because if it is rough on the back, then that's something that we need to address and not incur any kind of injuries with.
Okay, next question comes from Heather. She just wants a general update on the tennis courts.
Yeah, what we're waiting on now is a break in the weather. There's a clear coat that's applied to the asphalt. One thing about all the rainy weather since the asphalt was put down is you get an idea of how level it is, and for the most part there's very little ponding there, so that's positive. When we get a streak of dry days, they'll put a clear coat, and then on top of that they'll paint a green outside and then a blue and white courts on what I would call the main tennis courts. When the contractors they're doing that, then they will do the two southern courts. And while they're not expected to have the same life expectancy as the rebuilt tennis courts, I think that'll be a real nice improvement for any kind of tournaments. And if you're involved in any way with the tennis teams, there's a lot of times where the JV players really don't have court time. It's not lit, and so it's the kind of thing that having those extra courts will really be an asset to tennis players, both competitive and more casual tennis players. The other thing, just real quickly, is that what we're going to do is drill the posts in the next step, so that the posts are in before they put the sealer in, and then the nets and that part of the apparatus will be finished up after the painting's done. So it's getting close, but no one is panicking or sweating bullets. We really expect to be able to get done in time to allow the girls tennis team to step into their fall practice and their summer practice and fall schedule. All right, we're looking at feedback on the park equipment. I'm kind of excited about it, and I think to have that kind of unique type of park equipment here in Galion is just one thing that makes living here and having folks visit here, friends and relatives, just another thing for folks to be proud of as Galion kind of rebuilds itself and gets moving, so that we can maintain that status of being Galion and being miles ahead. So I want to thank everyone for listening, and we'll talk to you in a couple of weeks. Good night.